Welcome, student leaders, to your second workshop of the morning. I am Johnny Munoz. I am your room host for today. Do apologize. I usually have music playing while people are waiting, but didn't expect the first workshop to overlap this one. And I got confused with who was coming in and who was going out. But we are here today, and your presenter has taught leadership at Dougherty Valley High School for 4 years before venturing into the world of administration. He is currently the principal at Acalanes High School and leading voice in his district's media, tech, and equality. Also, he has a wife and 3 kids, and they are all quite lovely. Please welcome Mr. Travis Bell.
All right, Johnny, thanks for the introduction. And Olivia, I see you clapping. Thanks. I feel the love. I'm glad that, yeah, Emma, some snaps. Yeah, thanks for that. Hey, I'm really happy to be here today. You probably noticed that what was originally on the agenda was someone by the name of Frances Rojas, I think. And that's not me. I'm not her. I'm someone totally different. But it was a last minute change, and I'm really happy that I can be here today and share with you some of my learnings and hopefully engage with you all as well. I think there's people like coming in and out of the waiting room. And so if you hear the little doorbells and ding dongs, you can just go ahead and ignore those as that happens. And then what I would love to do though is maybe get like a kind of gauge of who's in the room today. So if you are a junior high school student, just go ahead and throw any sort of reaction up on your screen. It can be a thumbs up, it could be the applause. You could do it virtually or in person. So you can like thumbs up. Let's see, I see Elijah coming in, middle school student. Perfect. All right, let's see high schoolers. Go ahead and put a thumbs up or a reaction somewhere on your screen. Perfect. Okay, cool. So we got it looks like it's mostly high school here, but we do have some junior high and middle school students. That's awesome. Do we have any advisors, leadership advisors or teachers in the space today? I'm not seeing. Okay. All right, perfect. Well, hey, I thought I would start with just like a little introduction about myself, so you know who's talking with you today. And how I've learned how to engage both as a student leader, as a leadership teacher, and now as a principal. Johnny did a great job with the trying to pronounce the names of the high schools that I've worked at because they're not standard. But I started my career teaching at Dougherty Valley High School. It's in San Ramon, California, which is just about an hour outside of San Francisco. I taught, I got hired there the first year that the high school opened. And it was wild having to come in and trying to help create traditions and culture at a brand new school where none of that was there. It was also really hard because we had to take students from high schools where they currently were, and then they were kind of forced to come over when the high school first opened. So there was even this like kind of feeling that some of the students didn't want to be there, that they got taken from the high school that had a lot of traditions and school spirit and all that sort of stuff, and they kind of got plopped in this brand new high school. And that was my first year teaching, and I was teaching English and leadership at Dougherty. So coming in and having to be a leadership teacher and trying to build a culture and create those traditions was really hard. And there were a lot of crazy experiences. And I had to really partner closely with the administration because everything was brand new and we had to figure out what it was going to look like for our high school. As Johnny mentioned, I then took a job as an assistant principal at Acalanes High School. I did that for 4 years where I helped oversee the leadership program. And we had 3 or 4 different leadership teachers in the course of my time and as an assistant principal until we finally landed on a teacher that's now stuck around for a while. I'm in my 5th year as a principal at Acalanes High School now, and I feel really fortunate to have established a great connection and rapport with the current leadership teacher and a lot of the student leaders. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today is how do we partner, what I've learned as a principal, how I can best partner with the leadership, students, classes, and advisors, and also hopefully give you some advice on how you can partner and build some of that rapport with your administration at your school. All right, so I'm going to take over your screen real quick with I have like 2 slides. I know that you're probably feeling slided out here, but it's going to help me frame what I want to talk to you guys about, and then also hopefully give us some insight. So let's see, Casey Jones, you're right underneath me. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen? And we're good to go. Perfect. Thank you. All right, so I thought I would share with you what I would kind of say are 7 successful steps to partnering with your principal. And I was going to make some corny joke about how principal ends in pal and we can be pals, but I figured you guys were above that type of humor. So I won't do that. So let's talk about how we can just join and partner together in some effective leadership and engagement. So the first thing that I want to highlight for you is I want to talk about centering your values. And this has been really helpful for me as a leadership teacher and as a principal. When I started as a leadership teacher, and as I mentioned, it was a brand new high school, and we were trying to plan events and help increase school spirit and engage with the students in the community. A lot of what we started with were just things that we had seen other high schools do. And we had a lot of failures actually, because that wasn't our school and it wasn't our school culture. So while the high schools that some of the students had come from had big rival games, like football and basketball games, we were a brand new school. We didn't have that yet. So when we tried to kind of hold some of those rival competitions, like it really failed for us and it wasn't a work. It wasn't a fit. And so we had to really come back to our why. Why were we trying to do what we were doing? And what we really landed on at Doherty, and what I've carried with me into my next high school, was the importance of the student leadership class partnering together with the school to really impact culture and climate. That's why we have leadership classes. That's why we build a budget, an ASB budget, and work with our students to spend those dollars and put on the events that are in line with those values of culture and climate. And it was also about that connection and engagement. For me as a principal, these 2 items I know are going to have lasting impacts, that by helping increase a positive school culture and climate, and by really focusing on connection and engagement, there's actually a lot of research that shows that that helps increase academic achievement as well. So it's a win for me as a principal and a leader in my school, but it's also a huge win for the student body as well, because now they have found something to connect with on their campus, and the school experience is more positive for them. So as leaders, as you're trying to work with and partner with your administration, if you can center your values, and I would have this conversation with your principal or your assistant principals around what are our values as a leadership class, and how can we continue to do work that is centered around those values, because it's a win-win for everyone. The second step that I think is really helpful in partnering with your administration is this idea of assuming good intent. One thing that was really hard for me when I first started as a leadership teacher, I had I was really trying to connect with my administrator that was helping oversee the program. And oftentimes I would get feedback on how an event went. I remember having a really hard conversation with the assistant principal after a really bad rally. It just did not go well. Like, the students weren't into it, the staff weren't into it. It was low turnout because it wasn't mandatory. And she asked me a question. She said, "I don't know if rallies are worth it anymore." And I really took that as like a personal attack on something that we had worked so hard on. But as I stepped back from that and really checked my emotions for what I was coming in with as the advisor of the leadership class at the time, I really, I recognized that that was actually a great conversation to have. And it was a great conversation to have with my leadership students too. Is a rally something that we want to invest in and help build that culture in? And part of why I'm bringing that right after centering your values is because we had to come back as a class and really decide if putting on engaging rallies was something, if that work was worth taking on. And ultimately we decided that it was. And if we could bring that back and center it around our values of culture, climate, and connection, then we were able to design rallies that were more effective and engaging for our student population. But if I had just held that as the administrator had something against me or something against the leadership class, we never would have gotten to that. We never would have gotten to that point. So I think that that's a really good thing to keep in mind as you're trying to partner with your administration as well. The third step that I want to talk about is clear communication. So one thing as student leaders, I'm not sure how much access you have to your administration. I know I have worked hard to try to build open lines of communication with my leadership students on my campus and with my leadership teacher. And I would encourage you to talk to your administration about what he or she would like to see in communication. What's the type of cadence? Like, how often should there be communication between the leadership teacher and the administrator, between the leadership class and the administrator, or maybe that's just with the ASB officers or the class officers. But also, what is the best way to communicate? As things come up and you need to communicate, email is obviously one of the easiest ways to communicate, but oftentimes emails can be missed and tone can be missed in email communication. So I do think that creating a cadence or rhythm where you have some face-to-face communication, or, let's say you're in the middle of a global pandemic, some screen-to-screen communication is really helpful as well. But that conversation needs to happen with your administrator and can help be facilitated by your leadership teacher, or as a student leader to reach out to your administrator and see what type of communication they'd like to have. All right, I know these are quick sessions, so I want to fly through. The rest of these, and because I saw something just pop up in the chat. And then I want to make sure we have some time for some Q&A as well. So the next thing that I want to talk about is how you can take ownership as a leader. So part of taking ownership is that there's an ownership before events happen, that you've checked in with administrators, you've talked about process, you've talked about what it's going to look like, and you've put together a plan and proposals. CADA has some great resources on their website for how to plan events and activities. I would encourage you to use those. And then in part of your communication with your administrator, you're owning that process and what it looks like. But part of taking ownership also comes after the event. So not only does there need to be follow-ups with people who helped make the event happen and sending out thank yous and expressing gratitude, but there also has to be follow-up for what went well and what didn't go well. So owning your failures, I'll use that rally as an example. Like we did not do a good job of really engaging our student community or population on what they wanted at a rally. And it was this really internal design work without getting the input from other students or stakeholders in that process. And we had to really own that so that we could improve for next time. But also make sure you're celebrating the success. And my hope would be that as you have that regular communication with your administrator, that you're able to find ways to celebrate the success of the work that you're doing, and bringing it back to your values and watching how the work that you're doing is going to have a positive impact on your school and on your campus. The fifth step is talking about this idea of remembering your brand. And what I like to say to the leadership students at my school was, we talk often about how leadership students represent their school. So I don't think that's a new concept for everyone. Back when we used to be able to go on field trips and and actually get together with other schools, both like at CADA conferences or other conferences around, or maybe you're going and you're visiting a prom venue, or you're going as leadership students and engaging in some different activities in the community. You've probably heard that, like, hey, you're representing your school, so remember to represent your school well. It's part of the school brand, our leadership students. But what you might not hear often is this idea of the way an administrator, I'll speak for me personally, I guess, as a principal, the way I view the leadership students on my campus is that they're the standard of a future vision for what we want the school to be like. So the responsibility and weight that the leadership students carry is that they are to be engaging on our school campus in a way that we want to see all students engage on our campus. We want to see all of our students get connected and find something to have purpose in on the campus, something that's bigger than themselves and is centered around those values of culture, climate, connection, community. And so it's not only about representing the school, but it's also about being a role model and pointing to the overall vision of what we want that school to look like. And that's part of our branding as a school. Our leadership class has a huge impact on how the community views the school, and then therefore how the community is going to choose to engage with our school as well. So as you're trying to interact and engage with your administrator, I think that that's an important component to keep in mind, that we're representing the school, and that work with your administrator is all around this idea of we are working together with this joint vision of what we want our school to be like. The sixth step to remember is to hold multiple perspectives. I've learned so much in my 9 years as an administrator, that it's such a bigger picture than what I had thought when I was a leadership teacher. So I have this perspective that goes beyond just the four walls of that classroom or the events and activities that are happening. One example at my current school is we have a powder puff football game that has never been allowed on our campus since I've been there. It's kind of it used to be there, I think it was like 15 years ago. Something happened, they canceled it. And then every year the students are trying to bring back this powder puff football. And I have lots of reasons why I didn't necessarily want that on our campus. And so a lot of the conversation was with me trying to express the concern that I had. But part of what I've had to learn as an administrator as well is that the students are also holding a perspective that I don't know about, that they're engaging with their student population and hearing from their classmates, and hopefully engaging with people that aren't just within their sphere of friends, but that they're engaging and they're bringing a perspective to the table that's different than what I have as the administrator. And so I think it's a two-way street. The administrator and the student leaders really trying to seek understanding for where the person is coming from. As students, I would encourage you to be really curious with your administration, asking questions like why, and what could it look like if it was something that was done in line with the principal's vision or with the administrator's vision, and how can we bring those events and activities back to the center and core of our work and why we exist as a leadership class. The other thing that I would really encourage is within those multiple perspectives, you still have to speak your truth as a leader. And I still have to speak my truth as an administrator. And what I mean by that is I'm not going to speak for other people. I don't want to speak for, I don't want to pretend that I have the perspective of all the students on my campus. I know that I only have the perspective of the students that have shared their perspective with me, and I come in with my own perspective. But I need to speak for myself and representing myself, and as student leaders, you're doing the same. So while you're allowing and you're making room for those multiple perspectives, you also have to still show up authentically as who you are and speaking your truth. And then the very last step that I would say for a successful partnership with your site administration is this idea of an attitude and appearance of professionalism. This is a phrase or expression that I heard early on in my high school career when I was a student leader, and it was someone who was trying to speak into my life and really helping me understand how I showed up in different spaces. And I've never forgotten this expression of an attitude and appearance of professionalism. And I've carried that with me as a teacher, a leadership teacher, as an associate principal, and then as a principal, that how I show up matters. And this is all going to tie back into the branding of who I am and who my school and what I want my school to be, and it's going to tie back into my values. I have some funny stories of leadership students coming to present. Like an example from 2 years ago, the senior class officers really wanted to decorate their mortar boards when they graduate. We have a tradition at my school that we don't do that. That we want our graduation ceremony to look professional and uniform, and so we have never allowed students to decorate their graduation caps. I knew that I had concerns around inappropriate things being put on their graduation caps. Everyone throws their caps at the end of the graduation ceremony. They can get like really heavy and become like ninja stars as they come down because they're all bedazzled on top with these heavy jewels or whatever it is that looks like, or students getting upset that they threw their hat and then someone took it or whatever it is. So I had all these concerns around decorating mortar boards. But the senior class officers met with me. They centered their why on why they thought they should decorate mortarboard, their graduation caps. They thought that it would help be a unifying event for their senior class, that it was something that they could put on as kind of like a last hurrah as a class on in their senior quad on our campus. They were willing to listen to the feedback that I had, the concerns that I had. We already had established a regular form of communication. So I was meeting with them every other week as senior class officers. They would communicate often and reach out about ideas. I appreciated that they weren't going behind my back and they really were wanting to present a proposal on why they should decorate their graduation caps. So that was part of their ownership. They met with me before. They had a whole plan put together. They talked about what it would look like afterwards, and some of the scenarios that I maybe had concerns about and how they would respond. And they talked about how they wanted these caps to represent their school, and they were willing to really listen to my perspective, and I was willing to listen to their perspective. However, the senior class president at the time was wearing a shirt that had reference to alcohol on her shirt. And so I remember sitting there and they're talking about how they're not going to put anything inappropriate on their graduation caps and so on. And so I happened to call out and point out to the student about what she was wearing, and that had an impact on my concern about what was going to go on these graduation caps. Now, ultimately, I had built a good enough rapport with those senior leaders. She owned like, oh, you're totally right. I shouldn't be wearing this shirt. She talked about that she was just borrowing it from her dad. It was like a sweatshirt, and so she had put it on and didn't even think about it. And so ultimately we made the decision and they were able to decorate their graduation caps. But had I not had that rapport with the students and that senior officer walked in with that on, that definitely would have an impact on how I was going to move forward. So I think that's a good thing to remember and hold, is this idea that you're going to show up with this attitude and appearance of professionalism as a student leader, and hopefully your administrator is doing the same. The final thought that I have for you, and then we'll take some questions and answers if you have any, is to remember that at the center of it all, at the core of it all, it's about communication and connection. We were meant for relationships. We were meant to be in relationship together as human beings. And if we can keep that at the core of our leadership, it's going to go a long way. And hopefully that's something that your administrator keeps at the core of his or her leadership as well. That it's a people first business and not an other first business as a school. Yes, a school is about academics and it's about learning, but there's so many more factors that a school plays. And when we can center the humans that are at those places of learning, that's going to go a long way in terms of seeing a successful outcome and partnership between student leaders and administrators. So I threw my contact information up on there. We have about 5 minutes left. You can always shoot me an email. I'd be more than happy to connect with you. And then also I have a website that I started with a buddy of mine, matterleadership.com. It's got some great podcasts on leadership. And there's even some podcasts that I think are relatable to this topic. And they're about 20 minutes to 25 minutes long. So they're great resources, both as leadership teachers and as students. So feel free to check that out. But I would love to open it up if there's any questions that we can talk about or answer now. Yeah, so I see a hand come up. Diego, go ahead.
Hi, so first of all, awesome job with the presentation. As somebody who is planning to enter this type of work in the future, it's really an eye-opener.
Yeah, good.
And so my question is, what advice would you have given yourself if you could go back in time before having entered this line of work?
Yeah.
Or something that you wish you would have known before entering?
Like back, like high school, college, or do you mean as a teacher before I became an administrator?
As a teacher before you became an administrator and were considering it.
Yeah. I would let myself, I would hope that I would understand the, I guess that the weight of the responsibility, that it doesn't, like as a teacher, I kind of felt like when the day was over, I was done. As an administrator, I constantly am feeling the weight of what's going on my school, especially as a principal, that the job is never done. So there's activities happening all the time on my campus. So much so, I mean, not so much during COVID, but beforehand, where sometimes I would drive by my school and be like, I have no idea what's going on there. And so there's this constant weight of what is that, like, what's going on and how can I, and what might be in my inbox waiting for me, some problem or something that's come up, and the impact of the choices of our students in our community that has on the high school that I didn't necessarily feel before. So even we recently had a student sibling who was in 4th grade, really tragic loss. And even though that student's not at my school, that still had a ripple effect and impact on our campus, and how the school needed to do some work to rally around and support that family and that community. And I don't think I knew that. I don't think I understood that before I took the job as an administrator. But again, that comes back to some of those multiple perspectives that we have to hold. And there's going to be things that we just, don't know. But if we can be relying on each other and keep that communication open, we can really learn from each other with that. I saw Diego, thanks for the question. I saw a question come up at the start here from Casey Jones was talking about whether it's class officers or ASB officers. And I think it's whatever the structure is of your school and how it works. At my school, we have I check in regularly with the ASB officers, and then each administrator kind of oversees a class. So there's also regular checkpoints with those class officers. But I would work with your administrators on what do they want to see and what does that look like? And as student leaders, what is it that you need to really feel supported? And then would encourage you to express that need to your administrators as well. So I think that that's a great question, but it kind of depends on the flow of your school and what it looks like. Yeah, I see. I'm going to take a live question. I know there's some more in the chat. So Brandon, go ahead. I see your hand up there.
You said you used to be a leadership teacher. Why didn't you, was there like a specific reason you didn't stay at the school you started at, or was it just because they wouldn't offer you a job as a principal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I thought I would retire as a teacher. I loved being a teacher, but the opportunity presented itself at a different school. And there's a quote that really stuck with me. The quote goes, "A ship at harbor is safe, but that's not what ships were built for." So I felt really I felt really safe and connected on my campus. I was secure. I thought I was doing good work, but I knew that there was an opportunity to maybe leave the harbor and kind of see what came from there. And so that's a lot of why I took that job. Yeah, great question. All right, I don't want to get into the specifics of different events because there's a lot of questions about Powder Puff, but I don't necessarily know we need to think into that. I saw a question come in here privately, so I won't call that person out, but it was about how do we really establish a deeper relationship with administration. I think part of that can be that effective communication, like really outlining and taking to heart some of those steps that I shared in terms of regular communication, open communication, and then honest feedback and communication, and making sure that you as a leader are willing to receive that feedback. So asking those questions like, hey, how can we do this better? Or what would you like to see as the administrator? And I think that that sort of rapport and connection will continue to come over time. So, okay, we're hitting, it's 12:14. Johnny, I don't know if I'm happy to stick around. I don't know what's happening in this Zoom space, but maybe you can let us know what the closeout looks like, and then we can kind of go from there.
The closeout is 12:15 from my understanding.
Okay.
I'm going to stay for 5 more minutes if you need to.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to stick around. So I know some of you are leaving. I see people saying thanks and waving goodbye. So don't feel like you have to stick around, but I'm happy to
Hi,
connect
thank
when it's needed. Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you so much for the presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
I really
Yeah,
appreciate
absolutely. Are
it.
you kidding? Thank you guys.
Thank
Engaging
you.
on a Saturday. That's awesome. You
That
guys
was
are great.
really helpful. So thank you so much.
Oh, so good. Happy to help. Hey, Jose Cruz, I see your hand up. You got a question for me?
Yes. So you mentioned that when you started as a leadership teacher, that was a new school, correct?
Correct.
So like, how was the progress, and like what was that experience to see you guys like starting off as a new school and like slowly progressing to creating a school culture and stuff?
Yeah, I think that's it was a slow progress. So I told you, I mentioned we just started with freshmen and sophomores, so 9th and 10th graders, because of how they wanted to roll out the new school. So the sophomores had been freshmen at other school campuses, and that made it really hard because they were coming from schools that had really a rich history of tradition and connection established in the community, and that made it really hard. And to be completely honest, we had a lot of failures. There were things that we just didn't know. Everything was like a brand new process. So if you think like, what's an event that maybe you've helped put on at your school, Jose?
Mental health workshops.
Okay, yeah. So mental health workshop. So you probably have like, hey, last year, here's how we did it. We had student leaders. We went through these slides. Here's how we connected with the teachers. And so you had a framework for what that was going to look like. At a new school, it was like, I don't know, like here's what other schools did, but they have significant more number of students, resources, connections, all of that sort of stuff. So we kind of had to come in at the start and really start building from scratch what that was going to look like. And when you do that, things don't always work out exactly how you want them, but being okay with failure and then learning from those failures, but also really focusing on celebrating the successes, because every success really matters and is huge. So if we can do that, that's gonna help propel us forward. And so at Doherty, it's pretty incredible. They just celebrated, I guess they're now like 14 years, but they contacted me at their 10-year mark to kind of talk about my experience. And it's so cool to see where they are now and how some of those traditions have really been established, and to see the school spirit that has kind of been built, and how that's helped create a positive impact in the lives of the students and in the community, was really incredible. But it's a slow process, it took a good 5 or 6 years until there was really some routines and established traditions. Yeah. Not necessarily in line with this presentation, but a really interesting conversation. So thanks for the question.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
For sure.
Yeah, I had a really brief question that I also put in the chat, which is like, what are your expectations for student leaders as a whole? How often do you want them to communicate with you? What are some specific ideas that you want students to be aware of that have benefited the entire school as a whole?
Yeah. Well, I think, I can't answer that for you or for your administration. So I think that that's a great, that to me is a great starting point of a question for your administration team. Lots of schools have like an assistant principal or a vice principal that oversees the leadership program and works more closely with the leadership teacher. So you could ask your leadership teacher about who could be the best person to have that conversation with. Hopefully your principal wants to be engaged and wants to be part of that as well. But if not, that's okay. I would just continue to, hold that space for multiple perspectives and really be okay with what your principal can take on at that time, and continue to be curious and ask questions and be intentional about always communicating ahead of time rather than waiting till afterwards. For me, what's worked well has been like at bare minimum, like a monthly sort of check-in with a leadership class. So that can be coming into class and just having the administrator answer any questions that students have, but you have like an established time for those connections to happen. But maybe it's going to look differently at your school. Maybe it's something where, depending on what's going on, you need more regular communication, or maybe it's less. Maybe you need something school-wide or just with the leadership class. So I would really ask your administrator that question. And if you, I know this is being recorded and will be available, but kind of looking at some of those steps that I've outlined, I think you'll see some effective partnership happen. So yeah,
All
good
right,
luck.
thank
And
you
then
so
reach
much.
out if you have questions. I'm happy to help connect. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ella. And Andrew, I see your hand up, but so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Really quickly. So our school, we've been established for a while, and we have a bunch of traditions. But I think, as the years kind of went on, our events are like the same every year, and we kind of like people are getting bored with it, I think. So with kind of starting new traditions and stuff like that, would you recommend just kind of going for it and seeing how it works and like playing it out that way, or is there like a different approach to
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, absolutely. I say go for it. If it fails, and you don't have to do it again, right? My experience has been it just takes a year to establish a tradition. So we went from a senior ball and a junior prom. There were two different events. We spent about a year and a half having some conversations around benefits of combining them into one event, and getting some input from our student leaders and from the community and from parents, really involving all the stakeholders. But ultimately I decided to go for it. That was 5 years ago, and now that is the tradition. It's even after 1 year, there wasn't a question the following year, that's what it was going to be. It was going to be a combined event. We did a powder toss at our homecoming football game 1 year, and then that suddenly just became a tradition. Like that's what we do now at our homecoming football game. And so I say go for it. Make sure you have the buy-in from everyone that is kind of impacted, that you've really talked to students, and you've worked with administration on kind of the why behind it, and then be okay if it doesn't work and you don't do it again, but celebrate the heck out of that success if it does work well.